So, these should also be good. All of them are good, actually. My wife made them, so it has to be. That's the premise, and that proves there. Exactly.
Finds life in the
There's a syllogism. All things she makes are good. This is something she made, this is good.
I want to tell you, we just had a conversation. I know we have to be disciplined, but it's about philosophy. I told him that, like, I'm looking forward to the shiur, but there's like, I have like these mixed feelings. Like, on one side, I love philosophizing, you know, analyzing. On the other, there's like this voice, like, what are you doing? Is this just an intellectual pursuit?
Mm-hmm.
So I told him that the massa, we're all philosophizing, whether we like it or not. Because ultimately, what we do is based on a philosophy.
Yeah.
So you have no choice.
That's what the philosophers say.
We're just bringing it. We just bring it to the.
He's masking, so.
I think it's so. I think. I mean, it depends on what you call philosophizing.
Okay.
Depends on what criteria you have. So.
That's another whole sheet. But anyway, okay. Yeah. That the philosophers hold that year stock. I also hold like that in some level. Also, okay, but I can't say that sheet. The kid said the one line thing is that thinking is supposed to change your life. Not supposed to be abstract, playing games. And it does. People don't realize that it does because we like instant gratification. And it's like the Charichek Tzura. If you want to change your life by taking drugs or meditation or whatever, those are the fast ways to God. And the very long way is to like figure out everything, learn the whole system of thought. Which then first you have to figure out a system that makes sense. Noch eine ganze Sache. But that's the long way. And if you do it the long way, I think that you see that it has much stronger effects. It's just not less noticeable because it's... The Kaddish Maggid said like this. It's Chassidische Maas, I like Chassidische Maas. The Kaddish Maggid, it's a Torah and Sikkas.
Are you quoting somebody or you're
Yeah,
saying...
Kaddish Maggid, das geht. True story. It says in Navad Yisrael. Kaddish Maggid had a problem. One of the only personal confessions in any Chassidish Seifer that I know of. It says a story in Navad Yisrael. I think it's on Sikkas, Navad Yisrael, or on Paisach, one of these two. And he says that he had a chulam, he had a dream. And his dream is so the Baal Shem Tov. And he never knew the Baal Shem Tov, but he heard of him. And he asked the Baal Shem Tov a problem that's bothering him. And the problem was that when he was younger, he got into Avodas Hashem and everything, and he felt that it was steiging every day. One Shabbos wasn't the same as the previous Shabbos, and every year he had different tasugas, and he felt like he's doing something. Now, more or less every day is the same as the day before. Every Paisach he does the same kavunas as the Paisach before. He doesn't see any gross progress. The Baal Shem Tov told him, look at the little kid. Every few months he has a new talent. You know, he could walk, he could crawl, he could catch balls, and he could learn, and he could go to yeshiva, and he learns aleph bayes, and so on. It's very noticeable progress. And when you're older, if you learn one more masechta, it's not such a big noticeable progress. But that doesn't mean that it's less progress. That just means that you finally graduated to being an adult, and now you're doing real work, where the progress seems slower. And the Kaddish Maggid explains that this is the difference. I don't remember which is which. That's the difference in Paisach and Shvius, because he has a kasha. I'm trying to remember which is which, but it doesn't matter. His Ki Alam kasha. How come on Paisach we need 7 weeks, 7 times 7 weeks, 7 days to get through all the 7 spheres, midas to get to Shvius, and Sikkas, which is the same idea, according to the Ramban. There's 7 days, and then right away we're at the Shmini Atzeres, which is Atzeres like Zayre right? 2 Atzeres. No, it's the Ramban's Torah. It's not only the Ramban. The Medrash says like this. That there's 7, and then Atzeres is the 8th in both. So he said, I don't remember which is which. I always get confused, but one of them symbolizes that, you know, when you're small, I think that's the Paisach, like you take every step as a whole thing. It's a whole week. Now you're big, you're really doing, in some sense, a lot more, but it's a lot less noticeable. But it's different. The Zohar says it's different in Bina and Malchus. Bina, that's different in Paisach and Sikkas. So Sikkas is Bina. That's why I think that Sikkas is the bigger one, although I'm not sure if he says it that way. But Sikkas is from Bina and Paisach is from Malchus. And Bina means that you work with your mind. At least some level of that. And I think that it looks. Yeah, you have to be mature. Yeah, and it looks a lot less exciting. Yeah, but it also, like the whole story with, it's worth less. It's maybe the assault of things and so on, but it's katness. It's like the difference between whatever. I'm not going to say names. But there's some people that you see they tanzt kufas mit all the sparks are flying, and some people don't. But it doesn't mean that he's less happy with the Torah. It just means that he's more mature, or that his oil fit into his kyle and whatever. You could make different taritzim, but it's not. But really, my real experience is that. And I think that people don't realize this because this is not a joke. Like we read all these things where they say, like you said, Ben Aburim Labin, like some guy said you should learn Kabul only when you're 40 years old, and so on. Or someone said, it says in the Mesechus Kedushin, once in 7 years to the after everything. And we're looking at this like it's weird. Like it's,
because we can't relate.
Like, and we always have this question, like basic question that everyone asks in about secrets, right? So all this question on secrets, my wife. Like, well, I said this is the secret of secrets. What's the secret? He just told me. Yeah, but it's and then there's the whole like Chassidish teretz from the Yeshet Evrem that says, oh, the secret is the mystical feeling which is ineffable and so on. But that's also a shorthand pshat, I think. It's a secret because it's literally true. You literally need to be 40 years old and you literally need to have learned the whole Shas. So whatever the equivalent to is in maturity, in order to understand some of these things. And if you do it, like you have to have a lot of hasmada, a lot of dedication. You think about certain questions or you try to figure out certain worldviews for 40 years, and afterwards you can say, wow, yeah, and now it was worth those 40 years, but it's not, you're not going to be able to show ki zeh. And I think so, yeah. Really, so, Aristotle in this book, in the Ethics, which is his like Mr. book, he says, one of the very interesting things he says, related to this, and is that there's akdumas, like every book has certain prerequisites they have to know, right? He's always very interested in ordering the sciences, like what comes before what and so on. And he explains it because we need he calls it beginnings, right? Arches, Hanachot Yesod, right? How do you call them?
Premises.
Premises, right? We need premises. We need to start principles to start with. If you can start from nowhere, you can get nowhere. So you need principles, and theoretically every science like starts with principles. There's a lower science and so on. And it says, where do you get principles for ethics?
So?
This is called meta-ethics, right? Where do we get principles for ethics? Like, where does it start? The whole idea of what is ethical, or how to be a mensch, or that you should be a mensch. You know what he says? From education.
Right, moral education. Yeah.
He said, if you were brought up correctly, then after he says, this book is not for Yingalat, not for, I don't know, he doesn't give an age. He says you have to be ages berachnis. Age is not a physical age. But this book is for Ben Avraham Lebinas, and he says he lays it like this because otherwise you don't have any premises. Like where are you going to get? You don't have like what does it mean to be a good person? Like if you've studied being like you've practiced being a good person. Now I could start defining it better. I could explain you where it's going, where it's coming from, all kinds of chedishim. But if you don't have that, then basically it's not going to help you. Another way of saying it is, he says also it won't help you. I give you arguments like why it's better to act in this way than that way. But first you have to have like a saw that arguments are a thing. That you accept svura, like that you I
think there's also a certain amount of experience that we need to have gone through in order to relate. Otherwise we don't have a context to what we're doing.
But I don't know if it's necessarily experience as much as he does see it as a very educational thing.
Yeah, but also he talks about
properly, right?
He talks also about life experience.
Experiential.
He talks about life experience.
I'm 40 and I can tell you that my life changed after I turned 40 for that reason. I'm starting to apply the experiences. It's an idea, but what does it got to do with me? Another idea. And as you get older, you're like, that's when wisdom starts to happen. It's like, that's how it feels, and you start...
I think he does talk about experience, and there's like a line over there that says you need life experience.
It's applying certain things, teaching you.
As well.
Education is just a way of saying that you could have bad experience, which makes you a worse person by the 40. Like, but Avraham Levin is not good for everyone because they figured out how to be real evil people, you know?
Usually it happens.
Yeah, but I'm saying...
it's not just undirected experience,
right? Yeah, but you need both. In other words, education without experience. That's what the Rambam says. The Rambam quotes it this way. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he's thinking of this chapter or some gilgul of it. The Rambam says in the beginning, in Perek Lamed, where he has this whole thing of who's allowed to read this book. He says that explicitly, and he quotes a Gemara with the Bechanan or whatever. He says, even if you're very smart, you have to also be old. And that's basically talking about moral education. But moral education, because you know why? Because according to Aristotle, there's no such thing as being moral. Moral just means practicing morality. It's always virtue is just a how is it called? Teva Shani, right? Hergel.
Right. So
That's
the
second
natural
nature,
function,
second
right.
nature, but it's just being used to doing good things. So there's no way to get it without being used to for a bunch of time. This basically, of course, you could have bad experience that makes you worse, but it's not only like education.
In a
I could
way.
give you a sheet and now you're gonna be ready for the next sheet. The sheet is you go through life and you hopefully practice something,
Right.
but even that you get something.
It's
Even without, I think that both
Doesn't
are.
necessarily
These are
clearly
two things.
articulated premise, right? That's part of it. Is
No, it doesn't say the premise is if you'll be a mensch, you'll understand why
Right, which is-
why it's better to be a mensch than not to be a mensch.
Right,
If you're not a
some
mensch, you don't
argue-
understand.
Right,
That's the big
By the
problem.
way, that's what you need experience for.
Yeah.
That's why you need to wait till 40. That's because you tried being not a mensch, and I tried
Yeah.
being a mensch. You see, okay, how to
Also,
feel.
that's chaim, right?
it's funny because the
How do I feel when I'm a
McIntyre
bench
guy.
versus not a bench?
No, it's another way of saying there's no argument that can make an evil person good.
Right.
But a good person can be made better by arguments. Because I could teach you. You're teachable.
Right, it's the application
Argument,
of
managed
research
argument
to it.
in the Gemara.
You're curious.
You're going to be teach. You understand already. Like the Rambam says, "Soines techoches is makiv as Favos." Well, first you have to listen to someone. You're never going to know that you made a mistake, right? So you have to have like a cloud that you could make mistakes, and Rambam says that's why we have a roof or someone that's job is to give messer, and then you can get somewhere. But there's no
McIntyre
way.
is busy with this. This is what he responds to his critics. Was that very much that the Aristotelian concept of
Yeah,
of
this
ethics
somewhat.
ensures it actually
Okay, let's
make relevant judgments, right?
Yeah,
It's the-
there's somewhat answers like the kasha, like meichetais you should be good. There's no meichetais. If you want to be bad, I can't prove to you that you should be bad. You could, man, try it and see if it works out.
Nietzsche or Aristotle, that was the question.
But that's the nikida, yeah. Those like sort of answers, and I think it's true. I don't think any. Yeah, okay, but Kitze, where do we get to this? Kitze, that I said just two things. I said that thinking is supposed to change your life, but only if you want to. If you don't want, then you could grow into a breakers. But Talmud may well mass. That's the whole thing. It should
Meaning,
do
don't push.
that.
You see, you can't push the thinking. That's what he's saying.
No, that thinking. What you were saying, that thinking you could like just playing word games and stuff. And if you want it to be that way, it could be that way. And what makes it be that way and not be that way? There's not a tana that's explaining you why it's like that. It's a
intention, basically.
you could say intention, but or like this said experience or being a shtickle mensch lechatchila. It's very hard to teach someone like that was the whole machlek because we could teach ethics, but you can't. It's very hard at least. And I personally think it's like the Gemara says about Acher. You're talking about Acher, right? In the end, there's always this question like why did he go wrong? He was a smart guy. And it's one of the things they say. They have a lot of theories about it. Like no, basically we don't know. But they're like, why is there OTD? You know, why? One guy said because he ate treif chulav stam when he was a kid. You know, the other guy. There's all kinds of theories in the Gemara about Acher. But one of them, which is true, is that he never really meant it. He was not into it lishma. Right? There's the whole mass. It doesn't matter what the mass is. But the point is, something was wrong in him. There was not a problem of the Torah that he learned. It was good Torah, but he didn't want it to become good. You know, like I would say the Chassidus Shurim state that if you eat stamazan during the week, then it's megashim you become a gishim. But Mechul Shabbos is not megashim. So I heard that Achligid said that's only if you want it, not if you dafka want. Shabbos will also be megashim you. So you have to first want. I don't know if want is the correct word, but you could say that intention. You call it kavuna, but it's more than kavuna. It's a certain disposition or certain attitude. Yeah. Okay. Kitzra Maaseh, that was the Akdoma. Chassidische Maases. And the official sheet, based on the Ma'arim HaKoyim that it said, was something like this. That we discussed, and also somewhat made detours in Yom Tov and all these things, but we're trying to discuss what is the soul, right? And really one of the things we were trying to discuss before that is what we would want to know. What's the use of knowing why there's a soul, right? That's why Lamushal, not in this book, but in his Perish, Aquinas Perish on the Anima, which is Aristotle's book on what the soul is, which you should read, and almost everyone that talks about the soul since him is referring to some of the things that say there.
What's the book?
The Anima. It's called On the Soul in English. The Anima is just a Latin title. This book. Aristotle on the Soul. It's not this is already, it's only until here, but it's, and he says that before you start any subject, you need to explain to people both why they should be interested in it, like advertise for it, like this is good because, and you also have to like prepare them, give them like the akdomis, and not only the akdomis, you have to make them it goes make them attentive. Like sometimes if you say this cipher is so important and so hard, like what am I doing? Well, either I'm advertising my cipher or I'm like basically training you. Don't like read this Ian. Don't
just gloss over it.
Yeah. Or I'm just saying why it's chushev, why it's worth reading. So he says, this Aristotle says this, and it's also and you could see in many Jewish sources, that the study of the soul, we discussed this already, different ways. The study of the soul is important. Okay, so basically the way he says it is, we need to know which kind of knowledge are important, which kind of knowledge are worth going after. It will be the way of saying are good. So in him, there's basically two ways. And we can talk about usefulness, but he doesn't really talk about usefulness. Well, second, we'll get that's what my sheet today. But there's two. Like in other words, if we make a hierarchy of knowledge, like knowledge just means everything, right? You want to know everything that exists. But what kind of things could we know in regards to knowledge? So there's two different ways. With that was a whole sheet about Shiva about this, right? One is the level, the madraiga of the things in themselves. So higher things or more stable things or more lower level, like more principal things are worth knowing more than less stable things or things that are just told us, tetzuas of that and so on. Right? We would say God is more important to know than angels and angels more than people and so on. Because just like there's a pyramid of being and you want to know the top of it, it's more true in itself in some way. That was one thing. And the second thing, which would be the opposite way, right? We would say that some things are more worth knowing or more shaykh to knowing because they're easier to know, right? So you know things that you could see easier than things that you can't see, not because lavdafka that the things that you could see are more basic in real sense, but they're closer to you. So Aristotle calls it closer to reason and closer to us, or closer to reason as is, or closer to our reason. That's when, like Karev el Asaychel, do the Karev el Asaychel, Atzma, and there's the Karev el Ma'asaychel. Karev Ma'asaychel would be mouth. Then there's things that are below reason, like he has a whole shmiz about when he starts teaching about bugs and stuff. Like why would anyone want to know about bugs? Like it's below you, so it was good child. But it's also comes part of the same world, so it's important. And then he goes on to say that on both accounts the science of the soul is important. It doesn't entirely explain why, but I think at least one of the Prishma, what he says is that the soul is both a very principal thing, at least, and this is at least for animals. In other words, there's something, we discussed this, another thing, for Aristotle at least, not for other people, but for Aristotle definitely, soul is the principle of living things. In other words, what soul? Right, where we talk about soul, there was a whole sheet just on this point. Right, what does that mean? Why do we even talk about this thing called soul?
Why is asking... I'll let you finish.
I'm going quickly because I'm going to have to get to somewhere else. I'll tell you where to say your hawuris, okay? On different things. So this already... Again, basically for him, soul is just a word for living things. In other words, what explains that there's living things versus dead things or not inanimate things? That's what a soul is. Or the different kind of souls versus corresponding to different levels of aliveness. But that's... So in any case, it's a very big... So from in that sense, at least, soul is a very important thing because it encompasses all living things, right? If there's some principle that underlies everything alive, it's soul. So it's like the basis of all science of animals, basically, you could call it. But animals, including humans, and the animal just means alive. It just doesn't mean animal. Chai also means alive, not animal as non-human animal.
He's using whether or not a lot of what he's using as a clue to figure out if something is alive or not is whether or not its motion is eternally generated.
That's right? A level of side. Okay.
I'm not saying it's the reason. I'm saying it's a clue. Like it's a.
That's a definition, yeah. But yeah. And anyways, that's one. I'm just saying why it's important. That's one reason. And then he claims that it's also important on the other level. In other words, it's also important because of its easiness to know. And this is sort of leads us to the Silak paradox of talking about soul, because it seems that soul should be an easier thing to know than, for example, God or angels or whatever, the gods as he calls them, because everyone has a soul. I mean, you must know yourself. Epis, some kind of knowledge you should have, just by virtue of being a person, an ensouled being. So, like, it seems to be somewhat hard to know what your soul is, your own soul, but at least it should be easier than knowing totally abstract things or things that are totally far from you. So in some sense, the soul is like the bridge. That's what we talked this. Soul seems to be, Aristotle never elaborates on this too much, but the soul seems to be the bridge between everything and everything. Because that's where and Aristotle never gets into all the loops that this gets you into, but it seems to be the bridge, and especially then if we could talk about the human soul as the knowing soul, right? Because that's what makes humans interesting, that we know things, and everything we just talked about is basically parts of the soul, right? So the soul underlies basically everything. Okay, so that's the general why it's interesting. Now we want to solve something more useful about this. That's in knowledge and Hilchas knowledge. Every time we talk about knowledge, things that are useful for their own sake, right? The Shema, just because we want to know the truth. But things are also useful. Useful means not for yourself, right? When you say someone is useful, they're not giving a big compliment. You're just saying you're not worth for yourself. You're worth helping someone else, right? But the knowledge of the soul.
Intrinsically useful.
Yeah. The useful basically means always useful for something. Intrinsically useful, you would say honored, or you find it. You could say intrinsically useful, but it's a weird term.
Valuable.
Yeah, value is but value is a kind of weird word. But anyways, but yeah, you would say in Hantik it's not in value in itself. Okay, but today we are talking about why the soul is useful, why knowledge of the soul is useful, and that's not in the book on the science of the soul. It's in the book of ethics. And ethics, according to Aristotle, is politics, right? Remember. So for him, ethics starts not with people, although it's weird that it's this way, not with people trying to perfect themselves or being tzaddikim and gatolim haba or something.
People trying to perfect other people.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
So
also,
like an actor.
it's somewhat circular because then he says that why is there a state in order that people should be virtuous? But he says it's good to make individuals virtuous, but it's even better to make the whole klal virtuous. But it's very important. This point is very important when you think of Torah, right? And for us, when you say misr or ethics, it translates to the word Torah. And the word Torah, and this is something that people nowadays tend to forget very much, is really at least as political as it is ethical in the individual sense, right? Because the Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come. The Rambam says
do you mean when you say
the Rambam
do you mean
political,
social?
not in social. You would call it social, but political in the sense of there is a certain direction in which we want to put the social.
Because otherwise,
Not political in the sense of a political
because otherwise
party or something like that.
Society, basically, for the benefit that society shouldn't collapse.
Yeah, society, exactly.
Society.
Not only just going to collapse, but should also thrive and maybe even
thrive.
get somewhere.
Get
Collapse, they see it. Yeah. The word political has bad connotations nowadays, but for him it just means the art of running a state, of running a community would be a nicer word to say, community. And yeah, this is something we tend to forget because basically our state collapsed 2,000 years ago. So since then, the Torah became, at least slowly, there's like all process, but we're almost at the end of it. It totally became an individual affair. But that's not interesting. The Rambam, by the way, the Rambam has a theory about Moshe and Avram. You know this theory? The Rambam's theory is that Avram Avinu invented being an individual, good human being, and Moshe Rabbeinu invented being having a good community, being a good lechskan, a good nation that gets somewhere. And it's a whole totally different thing. That's why Avram Avinu is not considered Torah. It's Nevi'ah, it's a lot of Sachen, but Torah is not that. The Torah that obligates us, the mitzvahs, that's only Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's why Moshe Rabbeinu, that's the whole thing of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he creates a state, like a community. You would call it a state. It's also a bad word, right? So we say community. A political community, like a community that...
The Nevi'im don't politically obligate us either, for the same reason.
But the Torah, Moshe, that's why Moshe is the thing. Everything else it's very good. You should be having everything, you should discover God and everything. But Moshe Rabbeinu's thing wasn't that he discovered God. This thing that he was discovered, besides for discovering God, he discovered a way to make everyone else discover God. Like to make a community that sort of...
Make a system out of God.
Exactly. Not unlike what we... after like William James think that the system is always the bad thing, they are not acknowledge the challenges. It's not. He understands that this means you have to lie and you have to do all kinds of hard things. But that's the big, And he also thinks that Rambam explicitly says this, and Aristotle. They all think that you can't be a virtuous individual without having a good system in general. Maybe be yotzim akla, you go to the midbar like it says in Luchas Dais. But if including a person is going to be basically a product of a society. So if the society is not good, it's very hard to escape that. And even if you, it might literally be impossible. The Rambam says, why is there no prophecy nowadays? Because we're in exile. Shayches, because you're not tzaddik. Again, the guys are a bit be'atzvis. That's schwache masses. You don't have what you need. So the kid said, this is politics. If you want to be a political leader, you need to know. You need to study politics which just another way of saying what everyone should do. Like in other words, like. It's another way of calling this politics would be to say something like this. We could say there's all kinds of arts, all kinds of chachmas, right? If you want to be the best, and this is also what gets us to like needing to have like an ultimate value, ultimate virtue, ultimate good, because that's what politics is about, according to him. Because you could say something like this. You could say, and this is what we get stuck in this also, because we don't have politics nowadays. We don't have a community anywhere, as far as I know. And we pretend to have one in Lakewood, but doesn't work. We could say we have individual things. Like you want to be the biggest Talmud Chochem, I'll teach you how to be the biggest Talmud Chochem. You want to be the biggest car maker, I'll teach you how to be the biggest car maker. These are all, sciences or arts, or you want to call them. They have a certain end. You get to be the Tachlis Ashleimus and this noise, okay? That's all very nice if the Tachlis of everything would be to have the best cars or the best Talmud Chochem. But if you think a little broader, right, you say what's a human for, right? Then you need really something that a human needs a car, and also needs Talmud Chochem, and also needs judges, and also needs policemen, and also needs all these things. But what's the Chachma that talks about what all of these things, how all these things should work together? Like what's the like one goal? That's really what's the one thing that organizes all these things? Like how many Talmud Chochem do we need, and how many policemen do we need, and how many soldiers do we need? What's that? What's the art? So that's half kevel. Okay, no, Kenza. And by the way, that's a very good comment, but. At least if in the thought, but let's forget about how it actually works in the world. How should it work, right? How should it work? There should be some kind of science, some kind of chachma that tells us what everything is for, right? I know it's very easy. You ask me, how do you become big Talmud Chochem? You go to the BMG, they tell you. Okay. How do you become the biggest computer programmer? You go to wherever, they tell you. But what are all these things for? Like what's coordinating all these things, right? There seems to be a chaos. Supply and demand lead to a world where that's why we have no community, the part of it. Maybe supply and demand is a good mechanism for things, but and at least on the ideal, you would say, like if you're a Yid, you say, it's Hashem, right? But how many of the Hashem do we need? That's another question.
Each individual person's want and desire is what.
Okay, if that's what controls, but
you don't want a world where there's 400.
No, I know that's how we understand things today. But that's what I'm trying to. I shouldn't. Also, this is not what I meant to say today. So we have to get past it. But I just have to go on the side and more or less. Yeah, no. But he says there's not going to be enough people to buy the cars. There might be a mechanism. So in other words, what's the ideal? Let's talk about what's the ideal. That's why I'm just explaining why politics is what talks about the ultimate good. That's how he considers the chachma of the Mekitzoya of politics would be how many car machines do we have? Nobody says that. And so on. That's why ethics is the same thing as politics to him. Because that's why if you read Rambam, if you read Alpha Rabbi more explicitly, Rambam hides somewhat the political aspect of his thought. But in other words, like the Kizri said, what's a chussid, right? This is where we get these ideas, right? What's a Udumar Shulam, right? What's a good person, right? All the fancy word, what's Zayid? What's a good person? So a good person, you could say, he's good at. But that's not a good answer. In other words, it could be that there's a lot of ways of being a good person. That's not a steer. But if you say a good person, he's good at something, right? He's a very good baseball player, or he's a very good violin player. But that's not a good person. That's a good violin player. So a good person, according to, if you think in this kind of structure, it would be the one who uses, that's how we say, that's what it says in Kizri, that's what it says the most Chassidish misses for him, that uses all the kinds of things that a person do for the good reasons, right? And in the middah and the amount that's appropriate, right? Like the Chusset said, the Kizri says, this is literally this theory.
Now you need to know what's a good reason.
Yeah, of course. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Abu. That's where we arrived. The Kizri says, what's a Chusset, right? What's a virtuous person? Like general. General. That's what there was. The guy asked him. The Kizri asked the Chaver, "What's mizah chused shelachem?" He said, "A general." And he gives like a whole example, a long thing. He gives the water people the water, and the fire people the fire, and the gun people the guns, and so on. He says, "Hello, I didn't ask you anything about warfare." He said, "Yeah, well, that's what a chused does. He has imagination, so he tells the imagination what to do, and he has tavas, he tells the tavas what to do." And he uses each of them in an organic side, so he's nicht meshigi. He has a psemahalach, what his life is for. And that's what ethics is about. That's why it's literally the same thing as politics. Politics is just doing the same thing on a bigger level, and the whole shtut. And you could do it on a personal level also. And even the personal level would be the same thing. Because of course you could do all these things. Not saying you should only do one thing, but they all have to be directed towards whatever the one good thing is. Now we have to find out what the one good thing is. Now we arrive to the shali, what the one good thing is. Right. Okay, and it's happiness. I'm going to skip over that.
Right?
What?
The point is to properly allocate things to achieve a certain goal.
Yeah. But it's sort of going through this whole thing that, and the one good thing is happiness, and I'm not going to get into that part, but happiness is just another way of saying the one good thing, so it doesn't help us too much.
A circular argument.
Yeah, happiness, it might mean something, but it doesn't help us too much. So, a better definition for it would be what's known as the function argument. And also, I should get the argument there is, but I think, see, these kind of arguments make sense if you live a certain way. If you don't, they don't make so much sense. Happiness is not that we have to give a whole sheet. I wanted to give a sheet about happiness to Shana Rabbah because Samachas was tiny, but then they wanted a different sheet. So I'm going to skip that whole thing now. But the Kiddush is that according to him, this is where we get to Saul. 1 second. So the Kiddush is the main argument that Aristotle has for what a Tachlis Hanishi would be. Is something like this. He thinks that everything, and I don't know what the proof for this hanacha is, but it seems somewhat reasonable at least. But the Rambam quotes it at length in the Akdamat Perish Mishnais, and he's very excited by this thought. He says that everything is for something, and the best way of saying what it's for is to think what is special about it, right? But this is very simple. If you think
it's not the same thing as a functionalist.
Well, it's called non-functionalist.
Not functional.
The function of the thing. In other words, a cup is. I could say a lot of definitions about a cup, right? It's made out of glass, and it's clear, and it's circular, and it's cost so much, and it comes from China, and it's made by cheap Chinese labor because it's applied in that. And so a whole thousands of stories I could tell you about this cup, right? But all those things are somehow not really about the cup. Right? And a simple way of showing this, it might not mamish, is to say that there's a lot of things from China, a lot of things from glass, and a lot of things that hold water even, and a lot of things that are clear and so on. So what's the thing about the glass that makes it a glass? Oh, the geder of a glass is that it holds my tea, or whatever, let's say. Right? And that's what a glass, if you take that away, it's always glass. You could change everything about it besides for that, and it's still a glass, right? But that's a very simple way of showing that what's special about the thing, called unique or peculiar, about the thing is what shows us what the thing is for, right? It's for drinking tea. If I use my glass, it doesn't mean that there's a wrong.
The word special is, I'm saying there's a bunch of different special. I think the function.
Specific. That's what the Hanikra function. The same. I'm just showing why function. Why talking about what the function is a very much collected with what is unique about it. Right. Because everything else is also true. It's just not what it's for. Function is just another word for what it's for, right? That's a kitzur thought, okay? It makes nicht a thought. It sounds reasonable.
Yeah, but there's a difference between...
Now, of course, you can start asking, what if I use my cup not as a holding water, but I use it as a hat? Am I doing something bad? Weiß nicht. Okay. These leads us to all these kind of questions. But at least it's not a cup then. Then it happens to be a cup, but it's not mass, it's a hat. So now we have to think if it's a good hat or not. It's a whole different... It's a good child.
He's definitely not being a good cop when he's there for a hat.
Right, but maybe he's not only a cup. Maybe this happens to be also a hat. You thought it was a cup. Maybe it's Lamas also a hat.
If its function was to be a cup, and he turned into a hat, he's a bad.
Right.
He's a bad cup.
Now, bad is it right, and bad you sounds moralistic. It doesn't mean moralistic. It's just not good. It doesn't do what it's for. Exactly.
He's being bad.
Exactly. It's just not for it. For doing what. That's why, by the way, human bad evil is also. It doesn't really have evil in this whole system. There's just being misdirected. There's not really being bad.
Not being functional.
So therefore, we could apply the same sort of argument to a human. And we could say that humans do a whole bunch of things, as is well known. You could read the US Labor Department list of different jobs and see how many things humans do. But many of them, beavers do also. You know, they make dams, beavers make dams. We eat and sleep and have sex and procreate and all these things. And it seems like all of these things other animals at least do also. Some of them even non-animals do, but most of the things that humans do, animals do too. So it's still good. That's what being an animal is. It doesn't mean you don't have to farm as a man. Darf man sagen, get the animal. You know, you can't. Not saying that you could skip that. You might not be able to skip that. You know, you have to eat and sleep and do all the things that animals do as animals. Because human is also an animal, at least in some level. But that's still not gonna tell us what a human is for. So we start looking for the thing that only humans do, and we arrived, according to him. People might disagree, but you arrived at the thing called intellect. Also bad word. But humans seem to be the only things that know. And knowledge doesn't mean plan, and doesn't mean imagine, because those are things that animals obviously also do. And doesn't mean have social structures, because those are things that animals also obviously do. Maybe not to the extent that humans do, but the one thing, according to him, and it might be true, it might not be true, but there's one thing that's very unique thing. It's like a very particular thing. It's not most of what we do with our mind is not that, because animals do most of the things. You know, the Rambam says, it's like one of the craziest things that he says, that the Gemara is a mitzvah, don't, you know, and the Rambam says, Rachmun, it's like, mom in front of the children, you're dying. Although the halacha is not like that, it doesn't stimmt nicht mit the halacha, this pshat, but who cares? The point is, because nothing to do with the front and so on, the Zohar already asked this question on the Rambam. But the Kitzur, the Ram has this pshat, and then says, what sounds like what Eric, and the Ramban sort of asked that question. Who cares about animals? People, they understand, you have to be rachmunas and so on. The Ram says, well, you think that an animal loving his son is any different than you loving your son? Insofar as you love your son, cows like their children, and they have feelings for them, and they take care of them. Everything that humans do, we call it in imagination, the animals can do too. So of course, if you want to teach yourself to be menschlich towards that, which is part of being a human, taka animals don't have that. So that's another thing that animals don't have. We're going to get to that. They don't have ethics. Right? Animals they're not worried about killing other cows in front of their cows' mothers. Maybe some of them do, but in general, at least they don't come to my sheet, okay? So, maybe they do on some level. Besides this, they do. But that's why, but at least, but the point is, all these things which we very much consider human, basically everything that literature talks about, according to Aristotle, is not distinctly human. It's animal. The very complicated animals, the humans might be the best animal, besides for being humans, they might be very complicated and messed up animals. And beautiful and everything. But there's not human. So humans have one thing, and literally he calls it godlike, right? The Rambam said that's called Tzelem Lekim, Chalek Lekamima, and not Chalek Lekamima, but Aristotle calls it as like God, similar to God, the most similar thing to God, akin to God, which is that they know. I would say think, but that's not a good word. They know. And they know things which are objects of knowledge, right? Things that can't be understood can't be had in any other thing other than knowing. Okay, but Kitze, that's what humans do. So it seems like the main thing of being a human is to know. And that's why in the end of the book of ethics, it seems to end up saying that the best life is to be a kol man, right? The life of contemplation. But most of the book is not about that, very interestingly. And it's a whole famous, you know what?
That's the life of a kol man.
Okay, ideal kol man, not one that only thinks about cows. Life of contemplation. Is that a kol man? I don't know.
Very nice.
That's more or less the wait. We didn't really get to ethics, so this is not really what ethics is about.
Did you get to the part where you want to say?
I forgot what I want to say. Oh no, I need to say one more thing, and then I'll let you talk. Okay? No problem.
I don't need to talk.
Yeah, this is the kitzur of why the. This is the kitzur of why he thinks, and all the people after. I mean, in different ways, think that thinking is the thing. Is what makes you human.
Does he have
or
what
most ideally human?
Thought?
Yeah, knowing internal things. No, because that's really the only thing that can be known.
Fully detached
that can be known
from you. Maybe I think that's not.
Well, I don't know.
Detached from you, right? I mean, would he consider, let's say, a desire
we get
for
into
food?
No, of course not. That's animals have desires for food.
That's not knowing. That's
Right.
wanting.
Exactly.
So as long as it doesn't have a this worldly goal.
Not about this. These worlds are not really the way of the sort of comes out of that. But
how is me wanting food not knowing that I should have food?
It is. It's a kind of knowledge.
Okay, so what is the knowledge?
It's a kind of knowledge, but animals can seem to be able to do that because the basic thing is because well, one in general.
We can't detach the principle from the environment,
exactly.
Right?
In some sense, everything. Yeah, but even the principle of knowing that you need food is not very exciting because it's not really a principle of anything. In other words, because it's a principle it's a generalization about a world that's very unknowable.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. It's
you can't really know it because it keeps on changing. So you can't know things that keep on changing because they keep on changing.
So, but the animal will never
it's only knowing unchangeable things. That's unchangeable. That's always an example of something that doesn't change.
I like that
not the given to change at all.
Bertrand Russell in his big book, the Principia Mathematica, is a proof for 1 + 1, but it's on like page 76 and it's a side point. Like it's.
Well. That's the kitzur of how we got to think. But this book is mostly not about that, and it's a famous contradiction both in Aristotle and the Rambam and everyone else that came from him. If the main thing of a man is only to be a curling man. Or not.
By the way, it makes a lot of sense, the arguments, because if this is the...
Yes, and why...
If this is the most important thing, the most valuable thing, the most evolved thing that we do, then we should put all our efforts there. Because everything else has been figured out already.
Okay, but now you're making a useful argument, like a division of labor argument. That's not really his argument. You're saying, well, if animals could do a lot of... Well, it's not really true, because no animal builds skyscrapers, so maybe it's important. A division of, like, he's really saying that's what everything is for, and that's why it's a little weird, because it ends up saying, like, well, it's and also not entirely true, because you do need everything else. You need skyscrapers also, for some reason, in order to think, right?
To me, the skyscrapers are...
In order to think.
No.
That's what he's gonna say.
No, to me,
Are
the
they?
no. To me, the skyscrapers are a product of that intellect. Who gives?
But he's not curious.
Right, but the
about
problem is,
product.
this is the problem that, no, it's, this is a bit of a problem.
The skyscrapers
It's a bit of a problem. Again, if you want to organize society, it's not clear that you want to have more skyscrapers. You don't want to maximize skyscrapers. You want to maximize happiness, right? So, which means human complete shleimus. So you have to figure out.
Happiness is a new word. We
I
didn't
know.
discuss it.
I skip that. Okay. Because Ramaz,
I'm saying we're talking about functional and you're bringing
But
happiness.
happiness is achieved when
yeah, it's the same
everything's
thing.
proper
Exactly.
accord, right?
Exactly. It's the same thing. The same thing. Shal is what. Okay. Let's. Wait. Let me finish something. That's the very simple story of that. Now, this is all only leads us to one like goal for everything, but we still need to know a lot more things because. And this is what I'm saying, it's obviously not true that we could just all be Kohen Galat. In other words, even Kohen Galat can't just be Kohen Galat. And even the human being, as an individual, can't just be an intellect. Because he's got a whole bunch of other parts to take care of. And generally they even bother the intellect. And they don't let him sit in Kohen either because it's in the family or because himself wants to be Osgalten, whatever. There's a lot of different things that bother us. Aristotle was actually...
Or some of the animalistic parts
exactly.
of that are taking...
And so on, in all kinds of ways, very well known to people that are more than 40, no, anyone else. And Aristotle is actually very clear about this, like the Rambam later, where he says he very much thinks that you even have to be rich maybe to be a good person. Or somewhat rich, shtickle balbatish. He doesn't believe, he doesn't accept the like very idealistic things that Socrates said, that like, you know, you only need to be a good thing and you don't need anything else. He sort of doesn't believe that. Like the Ram doesn't believe that. The Ram says you need also the pshat of the Torah, like Hilchos Shiva, right? Not only a balance. In order to think, you need to have a couch. Yeah, I know Socrates claims that you could think barefoot in the market. You can't really. Or maybe you could, but not so well. It's not so simple that you could actually. And definitely if you want to give tzedakah, which is part of it, you have to have guilt to give tzedakah and so on.
Otherwise disturb your
yeah, but it's not only that, because then you could be a Buddhist and say go in a cave. So you can't really go in a cave. It's the whole thing. Okay, the kids it.
What is this, about positioning yourself properly to think?
What?
You need to do all that.
Somewhat.
Thinking?
Yeah, in other words.
Ultimately, thinking is still the goal.
Right. But it's very, you can't. It's still the goal. In other words, it has to be one goal, because otherwise everything, for him, everything falls apart if there's like one thing that it's for. But there's a lot, just like a cup. I could tell you that it's only for being a cup, but that doesn't mean that doesn't have to be made out of glass or of something, and doesn't even mean that a plastic cup is just as good as a glass cup. And especially, let's go back to the individual human, because that's really Rambam Yanik says that if you want to be a politician, in other words, if you want to organize yourself, let's talk about yourself. It's easier for us because we're not used you don't like being politicians. If you want to organize yourself towards the good, towards this thing, you're gonna have to know about how yourself is made. Okay, and he gives this mushal and that everyone else copies about a doctor, right? If you want to fix someone's eyes or even make them better, you sort of need to know how eyes work or what they are, even in the most basic sense. Maybe even you have to know the whole body because it's connected to everything. So in order to teach someone anything, you need to know everything about a human soul. And this is why even a politician needs to learn the science of the soul. Not even a politician, Dafka politician, because he's the one that's going to fix it. Right. That's why the Roifa and Afusha, that's the whole, he doesn't elaborate on this thing, but later people do a lot more. But, and this is where it's interesting, but he claims that you only need to know some of it. Because this is, again, we're talking about the usefulness of the science, not about really, in the end, you're going to want to teach everyone that the tachlis is, but now we're still on the way. We're still on the way. And we just want to get people to be menschlich, so they should be able to go to yeshiva, you know. And even for that, you need to know something about the soul, just like to be a doctor, you need to know something about the body. And what you need to know a few things. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know all the metaphysics and everything, how it works, but you need to know a few things. And the main thing according to him is they need to know is, and he says it doesn't matter how you explain. This is very interesting. And I very much like that, how Aristotle does these kind of things. He tells you, for this sheet, you don't really need to know the truth about everything. Because really you do, but halamasa, I'm going to make life easier for you. And for Misa, you only need to know like this. You need to know that a person has two souls, like the Tanya. You don't really need to care if it's one's really a kiss or if it's really a goy, and all these things doesn't make a difference. But you need to know that there's two parts of the soul. And he says, I don't care for now. Maybe in a different time I'll care. What does it mean parts? What kind of parts? Is one here and one there? Like Plato said, Plato came up with this thing that there's nefesh reich neshama, right? There's a part in your mind, a part in your heart, a part in your liver. That was Plato's thing.
Right.
quoted in all Sifrei Kabbalah since.
It's called the triad.
Mayach Lev Kavod.
Soul, right?
There's even a lot of, the Levens in the Republic, and a lot of Shtaivis for it and Yiddishkeit and stuff. Nefesh Reich Neshama. Or Mayach Lev Kavod, that they're... So Plato said, okay, Aristotle actually has a little simpler thing. Actually, more of the same. No, he actually works with the same three parts. They work with the three-part thing. It comes from Plato already, this thing, that there's the rational soul, so that's what knows truths. And maybe also truths about how to build buildings. Not a maybe, for sure. Like the mind, or I don't know how you call it, the intellect. And that's the highest part, rational part. That part is a tzaddik. Man doesn't really need to be fixed. He knows always the truth. Maybe making a mistake, so he could be taught. But that part is not really where ethics is. The Rambam has a shtickle Torah about this, maybe yes. In the second parak over there, he talks about is there really mitzvahs to be done in cycle. You could know the truth, but not really something to do. You might make a mistake, and if you make a mistake, then everything can be wrong. But it's hard to call it like a mitzvah, it's like an avodah. It's just okay. Maybe the mitzvah of Talmud Torah sort of like belongs to that. The Rambam is like confused about it because Aristotle is very clear that there's no ethics for that really. There's intellect, like there's philosophy is for that, but it's not like ethics. It's not like working towards something. Doesn't have a reason. Doesn't have any reason to make mistakes. Yeah, it makes mistakes just for not being ignorant, but it doesn't like have anything that makes you go wrong. Okay, and then if you go simpler, then we have the irrational soul, right? So the lowest part, or the simplest part, is like what we just said earlier. And Aristotle says this way, the Rambam very explicitly disagrees for some reason in the first Parak, Ishmael Prukim. But the part in which we're just like vegetables, or just like animals. Let's skip the difference between vegetables and animals, because animals are just moving vegetables, according to Aristotle, right? Whole difference in animal, Tzamayach and Chai is the same thing. The whole difference is that the animals walk around and vegetables don't. Whatever, it makes some difference, but not such a big difference. It gives them imagination and other things.
Is a Venus flytrap an animal?
Yeah, get the hakir, who cares? The point is, according to him, animals and vegetables are more or less the same idea. Nothing inside. In this book, he doesn't get it, doesn't care for the different. You see, the Rambam and Al-Farabi already brought the whole full picture from the anima in their ethical books. Aristotle didn't find the need for that. But in either case, there's a part of a human that is the body, basically what we call the body, but it's not the body, because body is just dead. It's the soul. The soul of the body, we could call it, like the soul of what he calls the vegetative soul, or the nutritive soul, or the nefesh bahamis, bekitzer. Bekitzer nefesh bahamis, so you could go nefesh tzemachas, which is like human. But again, the difference is just the bahamis could walk and so on. Yeah, the principle that makes it do what it does.
But the principle is not just the principle.
The form of it, bekitzer. I'm not getting into that. Bekitzer, the form of it, but that doesn't matter for us right now. And it's what makes you eat and sleep and now there is good and bad in this in some sense. Like the Rambam says, that's basically what the medical profession is about, right? And making sure that your vegetable soul works correctly. You know, if you eat the wrong things, then you're making a mistake for your vegetable soul. Although the mistake usually doesn't happen by that, right? Because this is actually interesting. Because your body, as body, knows more or less what it needs to eat. That's what some people nowadays also say. It's really your tavas that get you confused. So that's another level. Like animals don't seem to get obese usually, unless you like put them in a lab, because it naturally has some kind of, you could call it knowledge, but some kind of principle of. It's regulated. You know, it's that's the whole idea of being a soul.
It's not. I don't say tama. I say trauma. Nicht tavas, trauma.
Okay, it's a kind of that's what we're going to say. That's another precise.
Tamas is a trauma.
Yeah, it's not the precise. No, well, we have to have a whole theory. This is a problem. This is a problem because we have to have a theory. This is a very problematic thing to explain because it doesn't make sense.
Why does a human do against?
Yeah, against his own. Nicht forgot. He's hurting himself, right? It's a great problem. Okay, that's one of the big problems in moral philosophy. But the kitzur is what the body is this. So the body is, he could break and so on, and it's important for him to be not broken, and that's what we have doctors for. But that's not what we're here for, right? So that's the totally, we could call it irrational. Irrational, just a way of saying it doesn't listen to shirim.
It knows by itself.
Yeah, nowadays people like saying it knows. But the point is it can be taught, right? You never teach your body to eat less, like you could teach your other thing to eat less or more for different reasons. But your body is, and you can't teach it to never has a shir. That's what it means when I say it's not rational. That's all basic definition, right? It's not rational in the sense there's no shir that could make your body healthy. Right? Unlike what some people might think. I don't know. There's no shir. And Aristotle even says, and the Rambam even says, there's no shir that even, because he associates the imagination with this part, which is a somewhat weird thing. But he says there's no shir that can make you have better dreams. Maybe a little bit, and he hedges about that. And he says, when you sleep, and Aristotle gives this beautiful quote, he says when people sleep, and when you're asleep, there's no difference between a good and a bad person. Because to him,
I don't know
it's
how
not
he
true.
knows
It's only halfway true. He says himself that it's only halfway true. No, I'm just giving you the example. He's like looking at it. Another one, just.
Where is he taking that information from?
What? That there's no difference between good and bad
Yeah,
dreams?
like-
Suggestion, right? It says,
Like he knows what a dream is in order to...
Yeah, he has a whole book about dreams, okay? Managed. But the point is, no, then in that book, I'm saying it's more common, but I'm just giving it as an illustration of what we mean when we hit this like a rational part and the irrational part. This is totally irrational in the sense of when you're sleeping. That's what the part of you that works when you're sleeping, we call that irrational, because usually there's no shirim.
Subconscious.
Right. So okay,
Well,
I'm
it
in
could
it.
be true, it
So
could
the
be
thing is,
natural,
the thing is
right?
himself.
It's not
Himself. No. So wait. He himself says something like this, and I could say it in halachic language, it's going to make sense. A sleeping person is not responsible for anything halachically, but he's responsible for how he went to sleep. So what of course, it's true. He says of Harish that good people have better dreams or more useful dreams or whatever than not bad people. But that's not because of something they did when they were sleeping. It's because of something they did when they were awake. So a sleeping person is like just the image. It's not entirely true, literally, because when you're sleeping, it also you can have whatever, like it says. It doesn't. There's some difference between that Yid v'shloft and Agov v'shloft.
But it's like
But that's a din in being up. It's not a din in sleeping.
like if his digestion.
Other miyad la'olam afel doesn't really mean when he's sleeping he's responsible. It means that when he's up, he's responsible also for the like you call subconscious parts and so on. If you eat different things, you're going to cause different. All these things are true, but it's not as mitar the din midin shlufadig mensch is nicht midin off the mensch, which also like you'd say it has a influence on your subconscious or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have this language, so or on your imagination. But the Rambam said, and the Ram says, I think it's interesting. The Ram says in this parak, it's very interesting. He says the imagination, and the Ram he speaks in the language of mitzvahs. I keep on going to this language because it's the same thing for him as ethics. He said there's no mitzvahs for imagination. And in back of him, the right away says, what do you mean? There's a rida avayra. But that is for the Ram, that's not true. There's no avayra to have. There's nothing wrong with having a rida avayra. As far as your body causes you to have certain fantasies or whatever, that just maybe, like I'm saying, maybe you could control your wake part to make that happen less or so on. But
it's preemptive.
that as it is nicht kan avayra. It's not shaykh to have a mitzvah and avayra. That the rida avayra means you shouldn't act on it or you shouldn't think of it more in mimarba and so on. But it very clearly doesn't have it. He says clearly there's no avayra in the imagination. And it's an interesting thing that he says, but he sees it as like a natural thing. Like maybe it's like I'm saying, maybe you shouldn't have thought by day, but then it was not imagination, then it was like a thought.
Right, it could be a mitzvah about what to eat, but not about your digestive system.
Exactly. That would be a very good analogy. If you eat treif, maybe your digestive system eats treif. He says that now. But if you same way, if you think thoughts, then your imagination can have certain imaginations also. But the imagination is not doing a mitzvah. It's not. You're not then. That's not when you're doing the avayra, when you're having the fantasy. The avayra is the tinach. Okay, sure. That's
the avayra is not what you did in the club. The avayra is that you were nichnas into the club.
Yeah, some. Okay, and so now there's Bekitza. Those are the two top and bottom parts, clearly, the rational part and the irrational part. But now to him, the interesting action is not there, and this is where this is where I wanted to get to, because I think this is where it's interesting. The interesting part is in between. Now, how do we know that something in between? Because we do see, and Aristotle says it's something like this, and we see there's two kinds of people. There's everyone, according to him, everyone knows what's good. Let's assume. If he doesn't know, then there's a different sheet for him, but that's a different thing. Everyone knows what he should do, right? Everyone knows that he shouldn't eat too much and so on. But some people manage to stick to that diet, and some people don't. Now, what's the difference between those people? This is the Girish Shashala, right? Now, those people that do, it's somewhat rational of them. In other words, we say, oh, he's a smart guy, or at least a wise guy. I don't know, smart is not the correct way. He's using his wisdom, right? He has practical wisdom, maybe, or he has not exactly what it means, a practical wisdom. He has some kind of wisdom that he folked, but the masbeg that it's not good to eat fat, and he's not eating it. It's a rational action that he's doing, right? He's not just has a minig as used to a hedgel to do it. He's doing it patar balsaich. And the same way the other one, the guy that doesn't keep to his diet. He's doing something wrong, right? I could scream at him. I could give him miser. So there's someone to talk to. There's no miser to be given to your stomach. There's something. I talk to him and I'm hoping that he's going to understand. I can give him patch. I could do all kinds of things. But in some level, patch might literally be caution. But I'm not even. I could try to explain. I could try to convince him in some way. Maybe I'll give him a good mushal. Maybe he'll get it or so on. So there's something semi-rational. He calls it semi-rational or halfway rational. There must be some part. This is like it's a very interesting way of getting to it. There's like some in between this like totally body part and totally mind part. There is something that seems to be halfway. We could talk. We can't understand, but nicht allemal. Something's going on. Sometimes he understands, sometimes he just, not only that, sometimes he does the opposite of what you did. But that still already is something going on, right?
Why does he take it in a direction of something that exists in between the two, as opposed to two of them that clearly exist, and the interplay of both of them is the result?
Right. I think because...
create a third thing, or...
No, I think because of this thing that we have, and there's some people that said that, like, somewhat, you could just simplify it. I think that
my question is,
I understand.
It's cleaner.
You're right, but I think that there's something
new.
Yeah, but I think that the problem is that the reason for doing this is because we have, and this is really where he puts all the ethics, all morals, in other words, all midas tovos and ruas, and because in other words, for example, I'll explain you. The Chazon Ish tries to do this, for example. He's a good example of someone that tries to simplify it in that way, and much before him, like some Socrates might have tried, and others. You could say there's only Seichel and Nish Seichel, and Nish, other folk the Nish Seichel, other folk the Nish. But you have to understand, let's try to think about it. And firstly, the totally on-cycledic parts, they don't even listen to Seichel, that's what I was saying. Your digestive system, right? I could give him 1,000 Mitzvah, it doesn't change. I could also give him schlecht Dashpost and it doesn't change. He just doesn't care. It's totally not. Masha Einkein, when we say someone has good midas, when we say someone has self-control, right? Self-control is a midah, right? He has self-control. What does self-control mean? You could say his stomach listens to his mind, but that's a very weird thing to say, because stomachs don't listen. So who is listening to his mind? Right? You could then right away say, you could put that part into the stomach, but that's not correct, because the stomach is totally irrational. That's why maybe if you could...
Knows on its own, though. The stomach on its own knows how much to eat.
But so then that's the rational part. But insofar as the stomach is just a machine, let's assume.
The question is, what is it that responds indirectly?
I think you're talking more about choice. I think
that's what he calls will.
The stomach
will or passion.
Not directly, right? That's the point.
Choice. The stomach
doesn't respond directly to my shmooze, but I can...
No, he also, like you're saying, he also knows what to digest, and he never by mistake takes the nutrients and sticks it in the bathroom and takes the other part and sometimes makes that mistake. That's for the sick. That's
a mechanical machine.
Let's say not after.
1 second, I'm confused by this middle thing. Let's say you have people that foot's hurting.
This is a confusing thing, but that's the problem.
Hurting, right? You see,
it doesn't stop hurting, right?
It doesn't stop, right?
Exactly.
So what the middle
and seems like you could scream at your something and he stops overeating, right?
So the question is,
who is that? What is that guy?
Okay, Shmuley, stop.
Exactly. Who's the Shmuley guy?
All right. Or what part of Shmuley is listening?
I'm just trying to give the problem. You could, again, like Aristotle says, you don't have to invent the entity. You could say maybe there's a concept. That doesn't have to be a real thing. It's not important.
To me, it's almost like there's a certain amount of my intention of what's good for me, and then there's other forces at play, obviously, and those are forces that sabotage us.
Where are these forces from?
So,
which intention?
So today we know the forces are from trauma, but fine.
No, that's just an explanation. So the trauma is what I don't care. That's not going to change it. You understand? It doesn't make sense. So I'm talking about trauma.
What's Clippus?
Oh wait, Clippus is a theory for this. No, but Clippus is. Let's go to. I do this all. Let's ask.
You're asking what the
exactly. So let's get to the question. What I'm trying to let's try to go one level before. What's the question that causes us to posit a Yetzer Hara, right? Or Clippus or trauma or any of these things, right?
Because it's not rational. The question is, which is a good question. Like,
but
why
that question is not on.
Why are you
saying I'm too much noise.
No, you're self-defeating.
1 second.
Like the question is.
Hello. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna try. Okay, I'll finish at 10:30. I'm sorry, I will finish by 10:30. I have a class now. I'm sorry. Bye. Where am I?
Body doesn't know because we're naming it irrational.
Well, it's not that it doesn't know, it's that it doesn't respond to it.
No, I didn't. No, I'm going to finish by 10:30. Get me schlafen.
I have to leave a little earlier. Okay.
Besides, it's not best. It's not. I didn't.
I want to take it 2 steps before. Just because there's a premise here that we're sitting on, that the irrational doesn't have a wisdom.
No, not Avdavka. Forget it. It knows. You could say it knows. I said earlier. Because it's a weird thing to say, but we mean wisdom in a different way. It means it can't be explained to.
Without an explanation. If the irrational body knows, now pose your question. Because I don't understand your question because I'm walking.
But it doesn't know in the way that it. When I say no, I mean. When I say rational, I mean it doesn't respond to my shir. That's what I mean.
What does that mean? It doesn't respond.
I could give him a whole explanation.
Yell at my foot to stop hurting.
He's not doing it as
why
a
it's
deal.
why I'm not happy with what it's doing, and
He's
there's
doing
nobody
it
to talk
because he's doing
to.
it because he's been programmed
It's
to do
fixed.
it.
You could say, like he says, it's not
fixed.
doesn't have a choice.
No choice.
Although it's not probably what we're trying to get at,
If I
but
yell at my foot,
it
to stop
shows you
hurting,
that the
it's
same
not hurting,
problem.
right?
I get what you're saying.
I don't.
it can't be explained. If I have a guy, right, this is what we mean. If I have a guy in Shield that I explain him that, look, now is not the time to it's being, now is Hanukkah, and you don't turn your grage on Hanukkah, right? And I talk to him 1,000 times, and he just still turns his grage, right? And it's Hanukkah, so that guy is not rational. That's what I mean. That's a lump.
You can't teach it something.
That's not teachable.
Right.
Yeah.
But the irrational soul, by virtue of it being called a soul,
Yeah.
has wisdom.
Yeah, you could call it, it's just a weird word. You could call it wisdom if you want. It knows what to do.
It knows what to do
It's a
on
soul.
on its own.
Right.
So because it's a
You
soul
could-
and it knows what to do, it doesn't need a shear. It's
No, it doesn't need.
pre-programmed.
Ataka doesn't need. It doesn't need.
Shear
It doesn't do anything
apply
wrong
to it.
either. Like I said, it doesn't do mitzvahs or a virus.
It's programmed.
Your
It's
stomach-
programmed perfectly.
Yeah.
So the question is,
Unless it's sick. Well,
unless it's sick. So the question is, why, in this function, would it do something that's not functioning optimally?
Right, it
Why
doesn't.
with this machine?
It actually doesn't.
So the machine is perfect. So why would I put in more food that's making it imperfect?
Right.
Is that the question?
Well, that you're asking
Is
a
that
question
the
in the
third-
backwards way, right? Because, in other words, in the backwards way from the way we were asking it, at least. Right? In other words, I think, I always say it.
I understood the question to be as you said it. So
Yeah, but that's backwards, right? In other words, it's not a question. The
What do you mean
question,
it's
no,
backwards?
it's because you're sort of. I'll tell you why. Because
Well, let's say it like this. I
Because-
know I shouldn't eat a donut.
Because that's
My
not a
stomach
human
knows I
thing.
shouldn't
No,
eat a
no.
donut. So why did I eat a donut? Right? That's the question.
No.
What happened in between?
Yeah,
my mind
that's-
and my
it's
stomach?
not-
My stomach
I
knows
don't
shouldn't eat a
even
donut,
know.
right?
You know something?
my
Let's
mind
leave
knows
this
that I
out.
shouldn't
Let's
eat the
simplify
So
it.
how did I eat the donut?
No, we have to
Exactly.
simplify it. We have to
Okay, that's
simplify.
not like
We have
that.
to simplify it. We have to simplify it even more. It's not. Let's say I don't
Is
even
that
know.
the question? He just said the question. Is that the question? The question is I know I shouldn't have eaten the question. My stomach didn't ask for the donut. I know that I shouldn't have eaten
Yeah,
the
but
donut. Yet I
let's
ate the
say
donut.
we have to add that the stomach also didn't not ask for it. I think that for him that would be correct.
Okay.
It also didn't not ask for it. The
That's
stomach
true.
is. Let's say it's a machine. You will say maybe it's not entirely a machine, but let's say it's like a machine. Also,
By the way, I think
these are not
sometimes-
accurate
I think
philosophically.
sometimes the
Okay.
truth
But
is
let's
even
say-
when the stomach does not ask not for it, we still tend to do it.
Right. Okay. That's true because we're so crazy.
We're so
but
crazy.
but let's say it's a machine. Let's try to get the simplest. Let's say it's a machine. Whatever you put into it. But in other words, let's say it's a machine to a certain rule. Like you call it certain wisdom. Right? It has a soul. We call it a soul for a reason, right? Because we don't want to say it's a machine, right? That's why it's a machine. But that's another whole thing.
That's the thing. I was about to say it's not a machine. It's a soul.
Yeah, but this is when it's important. Making it a soul, saying it
It's
it's a
a
soul.
machine with a soul.
Again, let's. Okay, this is. I hope I understand what is happening here. Aristotle very clearly doesn't believe that your stomach is a machine, right? He thinks that it's a soul. I mean, not your stomach, but whatever the form of your stomach, whatever the soul of your stomach. Okay, now that is still not what he calls.
Aristotle would probably feel like a car.
In other
has a soul
words,
too,
another way.
today.
Nachashala, it's a good child, but not relevant right now. It has a soul, but the soul is in the factory, not in the car, because it doesn't really choose anything, and doesn't have anything inherent to it. Okay, yeah, in some sense, but he talks about mechanical things, whatever. Okay, the point is that, in other words, what you're saying is that let's say something like this. That's maybe you're gonna clarify it. Trying
The
to make
reason why I
clear.
went backwards like this is because I'm still stuck how you got the middle level.
No,
And I was clarifying my question.
yeah, okay, but
How
maybe
you
I'm
got the
making it
middle
too
level by
complicated.
saying that it's not
I mean,
too
for sure.
complicated. They're with you. Take-
No, so let's say something like this. Does this make any sense? We're very used to talking about the body and the soul fighting and things like that. Okay, he very clearly doesn't have that. Not Plato and know that they have two souls fighting, right? Because bodies don't do anything, right? So you can't have a body and a soul fighting. It's a very weird thing to say. Although they say things like that, but they don't mean that because they just mean two souls. Because bodies just do nothing. They're passive, even in the sense that the body has some level. So it's still passive. Guess them. He does his job very benamunis. You know, chaloim ram benamunis. Bacteria do that. He does it. You know, doesn't ever make mistakes. I mean, doesn't do bad things. Let's mistakes. So we really want to talk how we got to the two souls fighting story, right? Two different souls, and the reason we sort of get into this thing is because of the problem of akresia, basically, or the problem of that's how he presents it here. Because of the problem of the weakness of the will. The problem, okay, sorry. Because of the problem called the Yetzer Hara. Okay, of Yiddish. What's the Yetzer Hara for? Yeah, in Greek, Akrasia.
Akresia means the Yetzer Hara?
Akresia means that sometimes you do things that you don't want to do. And it's a very weird thing to say, because I don't want to do it, so I want to doing it. Epis is modern to do, right?
Okay.
Now, who is the you that doesn't know? We have to sort of, this is why people, Plato came out, said this. That's why we get up to the two yous. Like Tanya, man, this is basic, like, right? Exactly, or families, the point is, yeah, but this is, again, like I'm saying over
I
here,
don't want to eat the donut.
where today we're not talking about the metaphysics of this, right? Now, today we're not talking about, is there really parts or not? You look at what kind of parts, what are these parts? That's not the point. But what all the point is, but the interesting, we have to just get to it, maybe to make sense of it in his way, but the whole point is that there needs to be a part of some kind of you or soul, some shtickle neshama, that knows what he's supposed to do, right? Mm-hmm. He both knows the truth in the abstract, but he also knows the truths, and now is not a good time to eat a donut, okay? And there needs to be another part that sometimes knows and sometimes doesn't know. That's really another way of saying it. Because he can't say that he never knows. That would be simplification that you want to get. He just never knows. Sometimes he listens. He's just a passive thing. But he's not a passive thing. Vuraya, sometimes he even gets mad at you, right? Sometimes you tell him, don't eat the donut, ich darf essen 6 donuts. So, no, Aristotle says this. Yeah. No.
Yeah,
which means that there's a thing there. Again, what kind of thing? Maybe it's the Yitzhak, maybe it's a Shi and Dalet. Ich sage nicht what it is. Not even getting to the question, what kind of, maybe it's a shed that goes into you, maybe it's a Yetzer Hara, maybe it's a virus. But there's something that's why
it's an old philosophy. It's a fragment of philosophy somewhere.
Like maybe it's a trauma, maybe it's something that your mother told you. I don't know what it is.
Right.
But there's something. But the thing is, that something, what we're trying to get at, that something is very much in between the both things. That's where he literally says it both. We could literally say it both ways.
The passive stomach and the active mind.
Exactly. Passive and active are weird things.
Okay.
Rational and irrational. That's semi-rational.
Crazy.
I said that. Yeah, but that's there's rational in the sense of he calls it the will, or the how's the Ram call it? What's the Ram's language?
The
He doesn't say the word will. He says chika. Aristotle and Plato called it. Yeah, but we don't mean koich hamisayre. I know we don't mean rutzen in the prior way. He calls it wanting.
Intention.
And I know all these. Every word is problematic. Appetite. Plato said that there's the rational soul, there's the appetitive or angry soul, and there's the what was this lower? No, the tava. He called it the mesava soul, but he basically okay. Some Sfurim say that Sadiq quoted it like that. There's Tava Kas and what was the third one? Cycle. But Tava doesn't mean Tava, it means like your stomach, more like what we were saying.
But the idea is like sometimes my appetite wants broccoli. And it's good for me. I mean, sometimes it's in accord with the reason.
Exactly, and not only that, sometimes you're Tzaddik Gomer. Like, remember, we have these two levels of like that are called the Tzaddik Gomer and what the Tanya calls a Baini and a Tzaddik, okay? Also, everyone is just copy-pasting the same ideas. Okay, the Tanya, you know Tanya? The Tanya says that there's a tzaddik who doesn't have a Yetzer Hara. In other words, he has a, whatever the koich, but his nefesh bam, his Yetzer Hara is fine. He only wants the same thing as his Yetzer Tov, as
nefesh. Structure, to me, it makes so much more sense because it's just an interplay.
No, the Tanya definitely has 3. 100% has 3 levels in his structure also. He just is making it simpler in his presentation in Tanya. If you look in other places, he definitely believes in 3. Because otherwise you have this basic problem, which is who is the one deciding between the 2. Right? That's why we need 3. Because if you just have to talk about the 2, then you sort of, let me finish this what I was saying. If you have, let's talk about this. I'm just trying to explain. The Tanya, by the way, it's clear that he really believes that there's 3. Because we talk about this tzaddik gomer, right? And a baini who has a Yetzer Hara, but doesn't always listen to it, right? Basically. But the thing is that when he doesn't listen to it, it's convinced somewhat, that part. It's the Tanya called it tzaddik she'eina gomer. I don't get into exact everyone's exact category. So the point is, when you're that seems to be somewhat rational. It's not like me taking a cup. It's more, Aristotle gives this example, it's more like me explaining my son not to do something than me taking a broom and making it do something. Right? Because you could tell someone, I could say, I'm the tati, I'm the tati, right? I know what you're supposed to do. And then I could sort of explain my son, but he's not entirely going to understand, but he at least understands that he should follow his tati, right? So he's not against Meshiga. If I take a stick at my car, it's very different. I have a different relationship with my car than with my son, right? My car could be broken. and then it's gonna be shalit gar alami, right? It's gonna drive. I'm gonna want to drive light. It's gonna drive left, and I'm gonna brake, and it's gonna not brake. That's a broken car, right? That's your like basic model that you say. Okay, there's just cycle, guy driving, driver, and there's a car. Plato sometimes had this, right? A horse and a rider, right? There's a car, and it's a broken car. It drives the wrong way, right? But the thing is, a broken car can only be controlled. It can never be explained. It doesn't have midas toivus. That's another way of saying it. A car doesn't have midas toivus oruis. It's like either a good car or a broken car, but it doesn't have midas. It doesn't have will. Mashainke, my son, I'm somewhat riding on him, right? Because he's not the one understanding that now we should have a mincha. But still, hopefully, there's someone to talk to. I'm not just pushing him and hacking him. I'm halfway explaining him. So he's halfway rational, semi-rational. No, that's the thing. So and that he understands your heart, like what you call your heart, right? the Yatzahara, the Yatzahara as your son. It's more, and if you're a tzaddik gomer, that's gonna be mamish like a good son. Like it's a totally, always was totally convinced to always follow, but it's still can't be mechadish. Like it's still not the neshama by itself. It's still not the cycle in itself. So there's something makes more sense.
Yeah.
The difference between my car and my son makes sense. Yeah. So that's why we have a third part, which is it's not only forced, it's also taught. Because that's why,
I'm trying to get to the point that you're trying to bring out. You're bringing out that there's something that a human has that's, well, like he said, the interplay between doing what I need to do and not, and there's a point of choice, and there's somebody choosing that's different than an animal, and that's the point that we're discussing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If it's,
at that point, you're not calling the second neshama.
It's the medium. I don't know if you want to have three neshamas, then this is the medium one. Like some people say.
It's the place of choice.
Why isn't the place of choice?
I don't know if the choice is the correct word.
The chooser.
The point is a big deal because we're adding a third.
Wills itself.
Second. Right. You could. The idea is that let's say I have.
What he would say, maybe
sometimes I want to eat broccoli. Sometimes
Let's be a little quieter.
Donuts. When I want to eat broccoli and I understand that I'm supposed to eat broccoli, that's when the two are in accord. But sometimes I want to eat. I know I should eat broccoli, but I want to eat donuts, and obviously my stomach is the end destination, so the third, whatever. But is that the idea? Sometimes I want to.
Right. In other words,
sometimes I want to eat broccoli and I eat broccoli. Sometimes I want to eat broccoli and I eat donuts.
Right.
At
so
that point, who's making the choice?
the and I want to, right? The who is the making the choice. I don't know. I don't like the language of choice for some reason, but because I need a better definition of what choice is. But the point is,
That's the optimal idea.
yeah, I know, but I know. Another. Let's finish what he says.
That's very important.
I know,
will
but
is what gives you
it gives you the possibility for choice. It's not. I'm not sure if that's what makes the choice.
The will
It could be.
is what chooses.
I'm not sure about that. I don't see. That's why I'm not entirely
The
sure.
will might be what denies.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not right. I'm not entirely. No, I'm not. I know. You would
You
say.
want something and say no. It's not necessarily so clear that the will is active.
I'm not-
The will
It
goes
might be
according to
negative.
your highest good. The will
You
goes
would.
according
It
to
should, but it doesn't. Right. That's the problem. So we are talking about something else.
That's when the will
Because
doesn't work.
so that's why. So we could talk about will in two senses. Like you could say just definition of one person does what they want, right? Who is that person? It's probably the cycle really that does what he wants. Somebody does what he doesn't want, right? Who is the doesn't want? So it's weird. You could call it a kind of will, but it's not the same will. You understand what I'm saying?
No, but sometimes I want to eat broccoli and I want to eat donuts, right? I want to eat broccoli because it's good for me.
But it's
and
by
I
the
want to eat
MS,
donuts because
right?
I want to eat donuts.
It's by the MS.
Whatever I'm saying is, but I want. I don't want to. I don't want to.
Exactly. There's
want
reasons.
broccoli,
There's
right?
in other words. There's some. The other way. There's some has some. Let's say another. It has some reason for what it does, but wrong reasons, right?
Right, but
And it's
in that moment,
And it's mishake, but then it's
that moment, that program controlled my choice.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But there's something else besides. For in other words, let's end up where he wants to end up. He wants to end up here to say that when we talk about midas toivus or midas ruas, where do they live? What does it mean to have a good midah? For example, take the midas, but literally self-control is one of the midas. Or what's I don't know. Right? I know. We're going to talk about which virtues. Chvai is the virtue of courage. Okay, I like the courage. Okay, what's courage?
Courage is again control.
Courage is a virtue. It's a kind of control, yeah. But it's control in the face of danger or something like that, right?
It's control, but again, it's ultimately standing for
So-
my values, even though my body.
No,
again,
not like that. Courage
it's
to
again,
walk
it's a
across
moment
the
of
In
bridge.
control.
danger, in danger. Wait, courage.
But again, what
is
is it?
someone
It's a
right?
moment
But
of
the shal
choice.
is what we talk about. But ich verstehe. But now we talk about something called courage, right? What he wants to not do, and this is important. Unlike the Chazon Ish, I think this is very worth talking about this. if you could be the Chazon Ish and say, well, so there's not really such a, we talk about all these kind of midas tovs, right? This courage, there's no gemach midas tovs, any of them, basically. Okay? And no van, being a balkas and not a balkas, whatever the opposite of a balkas is, I don't know. Noyach, exactly. Then gentle, exactly. Being gentle, being flexible, being wise in a midas way, being farginner, all these things, right? What are they? They're obviously things, right? It would be weird. People do that. You could say there's not really such a thing. It's just in a particular, when we say someone is generous, we mean to say that in a particular instance he was magber his moich ala lev. He did what the Seichel says, and he wasn't the spoil from the Yetzer Hara, or whatever you want to say that, right? But then you're just denying that there's such a thing as midas, and also denying there's such a thing as training in midas, right? We're trying to get in order for our politics to work, we think that we need people to have good midas. And to say that people have to have midas means saying something besides saying they should always follow Seichel. Because that's obvious. Of course, you should always follow Seichel. But now we have to have a theory of what these midas are. Because it's true that at their base, they just always follow the Seichel. Right? It's always true that all midas should follow Seichel. Otherwise, it's worthless. When even every good midas, Seichel is helplessness, right? But what are midas? So that's why we get to this theory that shows that there's a third part. And that's where the midas live. And that's very helpful. That makes our whole theory of working on midas possible. If you say mushal courage, courage is how do you say?
What are the three things? The semi-rational, the rational, and what?
And the irrational. Irrational is not relevant. It's your stomach, right? Your digestive system, your dreams, whatever, in some sense. Right? Non-rational and semi-rational. Or semi-irrational, depends. You could say whichever way you want. And now, if you have midas, for example, if you have a midah,
concepts to the Baal Tanya, that basically this is tzaddik, verusha, this.
No, there's one second. The concept of being, but that's one second. He doesn't talk about midas, the Tanya. One of his big chesronis, because the Tanya is too simple. I really think he's way too simplification. He's missing a lot. He should have read more Rambam. The Tanya has only Nefesh Elikis and Nefesh Bahamas, mostly fighting it out, but he has mitzvahs and actions, but he doesn't have something in between. When we took what's midas is something that's in between. It really helps you, right? You say someone, let's say I'll go around saying someone has a unav, has midas hanover, shtayt medrash, it's easier for him to learn Torah, right? Why? Because if you're unav, you'll listen to your Rebbe, and you won't be like me and always argue with everyone, right? So now if you think about it, if you will have this only very basic, simplistic two-part thing, I just said nothing. You just said, if you'll follow your Seichel, says you should listen to your Rebbe. If you'll follow your Seichel, listen to your Rebbe. Thank you very much, right? But we do say sentences like this. If you'll be a unav, it'll be easier for you to become a lam, right? Not a lam, but a real lam, right? What does that mean?
I'm not following your point. What are you trying to say?
What I'm saying is that in order for there's such a thing as having good midas. In the broadest sense, right? Midas has smooth. Exactly. Besides for just saying your actions or your body or your Yetzer Hara should follow your Yetzer Hara.
Besides for an intellectual endeavor, there's something intrinsic about midas.
Exactly. There's such a thing.
Besides for its intellectual value.
Besides for just the interplay between these two things. Another way of saying that, right? There's such a thing. Yeah, and we talk about it sometimes. The Tanya doesn't talk about it, by the way. It's a big chesur in Chabad. They don't know have a whole part of life.
It's the part of me that says, I know I should have broccoli, but I want to eat a donut, right?
But if you have the midah of the stopkiss, for example, which is the midah of saying that you don't eat too many donuts, right?
Right.
What is that?
That's the semi-rational.
It just collapses to saying, I listen to my mind. It's not. Because obviously, for example, I could show you that it's not.
Another word for habit?
Yeah, exactly. Midah is another word for habit. 100%. It's another word for habit, but habits are specific things.
But a conscious habit, right?
Yes, midas are another word for habit. That's
not an
the definition.
Habit, a conscious habit.
Midas are another word for habit. Aristotle said midas are another word for habit. Teva Shine, we even have it. Yeah. Of course, midas are a word for habit, but habits are very specific. In other words, you could train this part of your soul to have good habits, and that's where we have training.
What value is there to bring habits into this conversation of souls?
Because it's helpful, and because you could work on them. Because there's something to work with. For example, I could give you all kind of exercises to work on, like in the Vardik. In the Vardik they worked on courage, right? No, but I think it's a practical answer. There's not a theoretical answer. Theoretically, you could say what you said. It's practically. Because in the Vardik they worked on courage, right? Remember? Ometz had not exactly courage. Right? They went to the pharmacy and ordered nails, whatever, right? And what was the point of that? Not because they needed nails from the pharmacy, right? The point was to train yourself not to care about what someone else thinks about you, right? This training works, right? Obviously, we know people that they're good at something. Whenever with the donuts is not a problem for him, but COVID is a problem, right? If it would be only Seichel and not Seichel, that doesn't make sense, right? Obviously, people have habits. There's something else. The habits is exactly what it is. It's not more than that. But these habits live in certain. You could figure out exactly psychologically how it works.
At some level, they're based on
It could be, but not only. That's
Not
very
directly,
important.
They were built by philosophy.
You could build them somewhat by philosophy, but only semi. That's why I said these habits are semi-rational.
Right.
They might be trained correctly. What?
Is anger a habit?
Yeah, or anger is an action, but the habit of getting angry easily or not getting angry easily, yeah. You could get used to it in some sense, on some level at least.
So anger, happiness, fear,
Yeah,
all of these,
yeah. A lot of them, at least we have to define exactly. But
you want them to be placed somewhere within the structure of souls.
Exactly.
You want to put them somewhere.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't you put them in the soul,
In which part?
the top soul?
Because that's because that
That knows.
again, you could put it. I'm not really. If you want, it's just help because
The reason why I'm
Then
I
the
know
top
I'm
soul is
good.
2 parts, and you're back to where you started, right? Meaning, why do I want to eat broccoli?
no,
I
because
also
the top
want to
soul
eat
doesn't
donuts?
need it. The top soul doesn't need it. That's why I was saying. Because if you're the Chazon Ish, if you read the Rebbe Tuchen, he literally says this. He disagrees with the Baal HaMussar. He says there's no such thing as midas. Because what do you mean? There's your cycle tells you what to do, and that's all there is. But then there is in other words, there's no room in the top soul for midas toivus or midas rois. Definitely not room, right? There's midas rois also, right? Where do those belong? You can't just put. You could sort of put all of them in the good ones in the top and the bad ones in the bottom. But that seems to be incorrect because your cycle doesn't have habits. That's another way of saying, right? It doesn't. In other words,
Midas
saying it's not the soul,
ruas are habits that are
It is.
based.
Why-
what I'm talking about,
Midas
the
ruas
intellectual
are-
soul.
What's midas ruas?
If you talk in broader lens, so you could say it that way.
I would
That's
say
what
that
definition. This
what's-
definition.
What's midas ruas? Midas ruas
Bad habits.
are habits that are based on bad philosophy.
It could be, but there's something besides for having a bad philosophy. Let's say it like this.
I've had bad habits.
It's not enough. There's some people. Let's say something like this. There's some people,
Don't
right?
keep it up,
That's why we talk about training. No,
Behind it.
Okay, but then I
some
don't know.
it could
that's
be,
not what I
but
would call philosophy.
but there's some people with bad midas and good philosophy, and vice versa. At some level, at least b'chetzonis. You could always say be'emes. We have to again. By the way, Aristotle is one of the most practical philosophers ever. He cares a lot less about cycle than you think he does. And he says this book is not. If you want theories, there's a different book. This book is to make you a good person. Does it make you a good person? No, it doesn't help, right? But it gives you a framework for how it's possible to be a good person. I don't know, something.
Yeah, go to the room and go to the left.
Yeah. Over here in the back room, it's where it's dark. The soul doesn't seem, the cycle doesn't seem to need habits or have habits. Maybe it has, but that would be somewhat a problem for it, right? It just has to think what the truth is. But we have habits. And by the way, now I'm reading, it's true. The Tanya is missing midas. He definitely never talks about it, as far as I know. And it's by
Listen, I'm not so convinced that you need it. You're
That
very
is
convinced
also-
that you need it.
it's very useful. If you need it.
It could be, yeah.
Need it philosophically? No, I told you, philosophically we might not need it. In other words, we need it for all these puzzles about the thing, and it's not clear how much good proofs these things are.
Whether or not it's a helpful thing, it's a helpful category.
I think that many people are. No. Let's talk about this. Is it worth? Let's think about this. There's Baal HaMussar. It's machlokes. Literally, like I keep on thinking about these Jewish references, but it's the old. There's also the same machlokes in some Goyish people, right? There's the Chazon Ish that says, "Don't work on your midas." He literally says this. Work on learning. He literally says this, and I think that it's the Metzias Mechich that doesn't work, more or less. No, does the other shit that work? Okay, I don't know. Point is, you read them in the Chazon Ish says like this. There's Baal HaMussar. This is the machlokes halacha l'mat. Forget about philosophy. It's practical machlokes to talk about midas. Practical machlokes. The Baal HaMussar and Aristotle, they both say the same thing. Well, whoever got it from who, they say you should take some time and work on your midas. How do you work on your midas? By practice, right? The Rambam says. How do you work on being a Baal Tzedakah? You give tzedakah every day, right? Until you have a habit of being a person that gives tzedakah and so on, right? Comes the Chazon Ish and says this is a waste of time. Because you're not getting at the, like you're saying, you're not getting at the Ekenekeda. This is, yes, maybe, he sort of denies that it's useful. It seems to be denying real, like Shemesh B'Tzaran. He says, don't do that. You should do one thing. And for him it worked, because he was a tzaddik, Amos. He was a tzaddik, but for most people, Bainim it doesn't work. And the Tanya is missing this advice for Bainim also. I don't know, it's a good question now, I have to think about this. That, if you're a tzaddik, in other words, you could get to the level that your cycle, forget about the word soul, your cycle, your intellect is going to control you all the time. Okay, you might make mistakes, but forget about that problem. That's a problem for everyone, right? That you're going to be the mashulim, at least in the sense of your actions conforming to what you believe. It's great, man. You're going to be the Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish says, how do you train this? By learning. Because learning trains you to use your mind.
You need to know.
Well, not only for that. No, he thinks that it's also training. See, even he has training. He says that when you learn, especially when you midaktik ba'halacha, to him halacha is taking Talmud and applying it to your action. So every time you're putting on tefillin in conformance with the Chazon Ish Shitta, with the truth, you're training yourself in the one midah that exists, which is listening to the cycle. This is Chazon Ish's theory.
So Chazon Ish, for example, let's say if Chazon Ish lived, I don't know if he did or didn't, if he smoked and he lived on the day that it came out that the Seichel was able to understand,
he would stop smoking,
science,
theoretically.
he would put down the
right, and he thinks
right?
that, and Noah taught him that,
there's no
putting on
part of
tzitzis
him
every
that
day.
wants to keep
That's what
smoking
he
when he knows that smoking is bad. Right, but for me,
doesn't seem to work, right?
I know smoking
Exactly.
is
So
bad.
maybe the Chazon Ish
maybe I need a sucking
work.
candy or something to change
exactly.
the habit.
True, exactly. And Chazon Ish will tell you, why I could stop smoking the moment I realize it's bad? Because I put on tzitzis because I put on tzitzis every day. And putting on tzitzis in conformance with the truth of the halacha teaches me that you always have to do whatever the truth
I can
is.
use it on my level too.
And therefore, I have the one good midah that anyone needs, and that's all.
But I could use the same thing on my level too, and I could say, look,
it
teaches me to put something on when it's a little hot outside and whatever.
Yeah. I'm not saying that anyone disagrees with this training, but I'm saying that he denies the need for ethical training, for midas training, and everyone else would tell him no. There were a lot of people that put on tzitzis in conformance with halacha, and they're still big balegava. You could visit Rechav Chazon Ish. No, good. I didn't say anything. And this teaches us that you should, for at least a week a year, focus on gava. How do you focus on gava? Again, by habits, by not taking whatever. I don't know how you work on gava. It's too much and too internalized to think of. But you work on beginning by letting the other guys speak sometimes.
Gava is arrogance. It's if you listen, you learn on listening.
Okay, I wish. Exactly. Okay, you learn by listening to other people.
Taking a Mago course.
Listen to other people. Exactly. So that's how do you become less balgava? By doing that. And it's not going to be enough to say, but I'm a guy that listens to the Mishnah Brita all the time. Because you still, now, theoretically it should be enough. But in Halacha L'Mas it's not enough. Why? Because besides for having Seichel and not Seichel, you have something in between that has habits. You have habits. That's another way of saying it. Or which sort of control your will or your... Again, that's what I'm saying, all these words, they're not so helpful. But if you say the word habit, you have habits besides for Seichel and not Seichel. And that's why we have Medes Tovos. So that's how we end up with the two kinds of virtues. We have the intellectual virtues, which is just knowing the truth, and moral virtues, which are not intellectual, they're habits. Ad Kan Ashir. So now you could ask all the kashas, but now it's 10:30.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
So basically